Hello and welcome to the High Maintenance Hippie podcast. This is your host, Ashley from Ashley Taylor Wellness. On this podcast, we talk about all things beauty, health, wellness, and optimization. Being a high maintenance hippie represents not being boxed in, as I strongly believe that one size does not fit all. I'm a nurse turned coach, and I have learned so much about both conventional and alternative options, and I want to help you expand your options. I'm here to inspire you to learn new ways to improve your quality of life and to take your power back. I'm so excited that you're here, so let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the High Maintenance Hippie podcast. Today's guest is someone I'm so excited to get to know better and to share with you all. Her name is Rachel Varga, and we crossed paths on Instagram several years ago. We had a lot of shared interests, and we're both really into biohacking. We're both nurses. So she has so much information to share, and she's radiant and vibrant. I can't wait for you to get to know her. She is an aesthetic RN, double board certified aesthetic nurse specialist, a researcher and publisher. She does peer reviewing as well. Her podcast is called the School of Radiance, so definitely check that out. And we're going to be talking about the one-on-one skin rejuvenation consults that she does. So Rachel, you have so many things to offer, and thank you for being here today. I'm really excited.
Well, thank you, Ashley, for all of your fun and engaging and, really faith-inspiring content, especially over the last few years. I've been following you for a long time. And I just love what you're doing. I said in a direct message to you the other day, keep shining your light, because there's a lot of ladies like us out there who we love to look our best. However, we're also ultra crunchy and granola.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're in the right spot for that.
Absolutely. So I'm really excited to get into some insights on skin health, slowing aging, reducing oxidative stress, how biohacking can actually help our skin, and, also maybe some things to avoid and some of the things I've published in my research on rejuvenation algorithms, which I'm really excited to get into with you today.
Before we started recording, we talked a little bit about the consult, and I will be doing one, spoiler alert. So we'll talk more about what that looks like, but everything is about bioindividuality. And I think it's really confusing when we go online or to a conference or just anywhere. And I just don't believe that one size fits all. I think that there are many amazing options, but just because it works well for someone else, it may not work for us. So bioindividuality is something that I'm owning, but also in what feels right for me. We can be crunchy and want to look good. So have you ever felt judged or like you had to pick between the two? Like, I need to be taken seriously and intelligent, or I want to be beautiful. Did you ever feel like there was a conflict there at some point in your life?
Oh, that's such a great question. What's interesting is let's actually do a little bit of a case study, shall we? As nurses, practitioners, we love this. What happened in my clinical practice? I've done 20,000 rejuvenation procedures since 2011, clinical trainer for other doctors and nurses as well. I started to notice what certain clients of mine were doing, that they were in their 60s to 90s. And I talk about this in my Audible, Radiance, the New Skin Science, my own personal journey of being called the ugliest girl in the world when I was in grade 8, the ugliest girl in the world. And then what that did to me psychologically and put me on this quest to really overcompensate for that and become the most prettiest version I possibly could in regards to societal standards. And what was interesting was also getting into the business and the industry of that, which is also a multi-billion-dollar industry with more and more medical spas being bought up by corporate conglomerates, which is absolutely pushing the industry towards more of a cookie cutter approach, which I am passionate about being a leader in shifting. But one of the things that I wanted to mention with that is with my older clients, my more mature clients, my more wise clients. I've always got on with women that were about 20 years older than I am. Just have so much to offer. They've been around the block, right? Not a lot phases them. They've cultivated something called radiance. So these lovely women, and sometimes men too, would enter my treatment room or on a Zoom call like this. I've been doing Zoom consults across the globe since about 2017, before anybody knew what Zoom was. I kind of see the writings on the wall before things happen. Pretty common thing in my life. And, these individuals would say to me, Rachel, just help me look as good as I feel. And then I would start to do things for them like skincare. And I love lasers. I love energy-based modalities to resurface the skin, reduce pigmentation, get the skin cells to behave younger. And they would just hardly need anything. And then I also started to notice this trend of more and more clients not wanting injectables anymore and wanting to look at a cleaner approach and really focusing on their skin health. So I learned a lot about what beauty, what radiance is actually from my thousands of clients that I've served and taking notes out of their playbook, sharing that all with you here.
Yeah. So it's interesting that that was a story that you were told, ugliest girl in the world. When we hear something negative, we usually cling to that a lot more than the positive. And I can think of many situations. So was that a driving factor to getting into aesthetics professionally?
Unconsciously, absolutely.
Okay.
So from a really young age of grade 8, having been told, I mean, the boy was teasing me. He was probably flirting with me. But then, a couple of years earlier, was told, what'd you do, Rachel? Stick your finger in a light bulb socket because my hair is so thick and curly. I have enough hair for like 3 people.
I'll take some. I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's amazing.
So sometimes young women can get teased. And really only over the last little while did I recognize, wow, what that point in my life did to put me on a trajectory to be my most beautiful version so that I felt lovable. There's a lot of deep stuff that I just said right there. And the other really interesting thing here is, unfortunately, half of marriages end in divorce these days, right? So this whole concept of looking and feeling our best to actually have better relationships where both people look after themselves, both people do biohacking, both people eat well, both people exercise, you're both doing your skincare, using clean products, right? We can't be this crunchy and granola girlfriend, fiance, wife, mother over here if our partner is still using things, like the body sprays and things for men that are just full of toxins. That might not work out so well because be like, I don't want to get in the shower when you just use that and it stinks and I'm going to expose you to phthalates. It just doesn't work. So the whole thing about skincare and self-care and biohacking is that it's also really key in relationships to have those shared values and good boundaries. Previous relationship I was in, 1930s home, there was mold in renovations, and my air purifiers were unplugged. Yeah, exactly. Your face right there, right? So clearly that relationship didn't work out, right? Because there wasn't the shared values and boundaries. So not only are we looking at reducing oxidative stress, being our most vibrant versions, it's not just for us, it's also for our families. And I see a lot of young women, amateur women and men who are really interested in all the biohacking stuff, the functional stuff, not only for them, but for their whole families too, which I think is commendable. So for you listening, taking this all in, you're going to be able to nurture and care for your families even better too.
Yeah. When you first became a nurse, you were doing neuromodulators, which some people call neurotoxins, and injectables. So what was that like at that time and why did you move away from it?
Well, it was very popular, right? It was like the most popular rejuvenation option out there. You want to become an aesthetic nurse, first thing you do is you fork out a lot of money to get your neuromodulator training. And you can bet I sought out the best of the best for that training and then became a trainer myself later. Some of these options, there's non-surgical and there's surgical options. It depends, right? So say, for example, someone is coming to see me and they're wanting to take care of things like hooded upper eyelids or lower eye bags or forehead lines or jowls. There's lots of options that are available. Neuromodulators and fillers aren't the be all end all. In fact, I'm a huge fan of, and I have this in my published research, and it took me a long time to figure this out and really notice who I was caring for, that had the best skin and also the best life, right? Their nervous systems were regulated. What did they look like? What were they interested in receiving? And how much did they care about eating organic, eating healthy? And those were also the clients of mine that were the most picky with the skincare products that they were willing to go home with. So not only have my clients over the years opened my eyes up to preferences, also it's allowed me to become a more discerning client myself, more discerning consumer myself, to learn, okay, there's a lot of people that really don't want parabens in their skincare. And there's a lot of research to talk about why that's bad. When a lot of my colleagues, they don't have the time to learn about this stuff, right? Companies say, oh, this is good, this is not good. They just kind of take that at face value without doing the research. But when you start to observe, when you become a researcher, you notice signals. So the signal to me is just really interesting with this bioindividuality stuff, with moving away from primarily an injectable practice to more energy, to more reducing oxidative stress. That was interesting. The really interesting thing was, for me, is every month I was getting a facial type of procedure, and I was also getting a photofacial to take care of things like breakouts, to reduce post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, red acne scars that were not going away. So every month I'd have to do a facial, give that skin a good deep clean, and then also couple that and stack that with a laser to get rid of the redness. So once I started to reduce oxidative stress, I realized I needed far fewer in-clinic rejuvenation. So this was a massive aha moment to me. And I'm happy to dive more into that. But I basically went from, as a practitioner, I get access to everything, anything and everything, the top of the line, everything. I went from about 60% in clinic, 40% home care, to now what I would say about 90% home care and only 10% in clinic. So I'll be the first to tell you that this is possible.
Yeah. You shared when we were talking before about your journey getting into biohacking. So I was interested in it around the same time, but it sounds like 2019, something major happened that really was a pivotal moment in your life. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, absolutely. Well, one of my good friends is considered the godfather of biohacking. And I've known him for about, 10, 11 years now. We're both from Vancouver Island, which is originally where I'm from. Very small island. I was very protected growing up, actually, in this kind of small town, small island, which is great. And so I started to incorporate biohacking simply because I saw biohackers recover so much faster. So say, for example, a laser resurfacing session that would take 5 days of redness and swelling to go down, I'd see them on, a media event, like a huge show. The next day, I was like, what is going on here? How is this even possible? It's like, oh, okay, reducing oxidative stress makes a big difference in the way that the body rejuvenates. Right? So if we do this, what's called heavy lifting at home ahead of time, and I have this in my published research now, reducing oxidative stress, whispering and talking and communicating to the skin with skincare, retinols, peels, clean versions of retinols, by the way, at home microneedling, then doing some in-clinic stuff is really helpful. So getting back to the event that I experienced in my life that really required me to go deep was around 2019. I was rear-ended really badly. I was in, my university Honda Civic, this little car. I rear-ended from behind at a stoplight, minding my own business, by a big SUV, and had my hand on the gear shift because I drove stick, and foot was on the clutch and all this stuff. So I got rocked. And actually, right after that, I held my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I okay? And I'm a nurse, right? We get right into that mode of is everything okay? Anyways, felt pretty rough right after that. A lot of pain started to happen, and just really did everything I could to recover from that, including cold plunging, which I ended up overdoing. It's all about yin yang, right? We got to balance the hot, the cold, the masculine, the feminine. I was way too much cold plunging, but also the ocean here is very cold. So it's easy to do the cold plunging. It's kind of like this flex. So I did that a couple times a week. Really focused on air purification, eating the right foods, watching my exposure to LEDs. Some of the biggest changes that I made for reducing pain and inflammation, because I really was willing to do the work. I really didn't want to go down the route of prescription medication for pain control. So it took a lot of extra work. And I think that most people, when they're in that stage, they're not really willing to do it. But those of us that are, the interesting thing is, here I was looking after myself to reduce inflammation, to reduce pain, so that I wasn't miserable to be around, and so that I could continue to do the highly specialized work that I spent so long learning how to do and invest so much money into. And then my skin got better. Right around the car crash, I had massive breakouts on my neck, on the face. It was incredible. So that also taught me, when the body's under stress acutely, your skin is going to show it within about a couple of days. So if you go on a bender, or you live in moderation, which I'm a huge fan of living in moderation, you might notice it on your skin a couple of days to a couple of weeks later with your diet, nutrition, sleep, lifestyle. So it was not only one car crash, though. It was actually two. So here I am, this jet set nurse, teaching and training all over the place, high demand, and teaching in Vancouver, Toronto, California, New York, clients coming to see me from all over the globe. Got in this big car crash. Then, because I didn't get the message yet, I got in a second car crash. I was actually T-boned in my girlfriend's Camaro on my way to the beach to do a cold plunge to recover from the first one. So it's interesting when we look at our lives. Number one, being called the ugliest girl in the world sent me down this path of, how can I be my most beautiful version? To then the car crash is completely bumping me off course that I was told my whole life: work like a man, have a great career, have a great respectable career, all this stuff. Totally bumped off course to then now this deeper layer of lasting beauty and radiance, which is really what I'm here to do. And it's so much fun to explore this concept, because it's so much deeper than, how does a neuromodulator work? How does a dermal filler work? How do we apply it, and all these things? There's so much more to this: body, mind, spirit, energy, oxidative stress, biohacking, the consciousness, the faith, the family component to looking and feeling our best, our deep-rooted needs for survival, to be confident, to build our community. So that's one of the deep-rooted reasons why behind rejuvenation. So that's a little bit about my journey.
Yeah. I am 36. I started doing cosmetic tweaks, I suppose you could say, when I was 18. But before that, the first thing I ever did was Accutane, because I had deep cystic acne. I was told that it had nothing to do with my diet. I was willing to modify that for a few months before starting Accutane. It was very expensive. I had to take a pregnancy test every month. And sitting there, that's where I first saw a flyer for Botox. I know we're not going to use any specific names or brands, but that's what I saw. I was like, great, if this is going to help with prevention and all of that, I would love to know your thoughts on this. I see a lot of younger women doing these things, and there is no regard for lifestyle. So you do get an immediate enhancement, I suppose. But if you do not take care of your insides, there is no amount of external treatments, in my opinion, that will give you that radiance, because that comes from within. That comes from the eyes. Up until I was 28, I decorated my shell, but I had dead eyes. Like, they were dark, they were heavy. There was no vibrance there. As far as inside out, I call it decorating my shell. It's, I think, maybe 10% or less comes from that. And then the other 90% comes from within. So when you got into biohacking and you wanted to manage pain, you noticed, great, my skin's even better. How did that change the beauty practices that you were doing? Did you find that you really needed less as you got older because you were taking care of the inside?
100% needed less, which is really interesting. Sure, I was in 2 car crashes, but I've gone through a massive hero's journey myself. That's what my Audible is all about, including a long fast in the desert at altitude, actually right near you, in Sedona in southern Utah, which really tested my metabolic flexibility and put me in a beautiful state of autophagy. You touched on a couple of key things that I'm going to unpack here. One of my frustrations with the industry is that there is this disconnect between this awareness of oxidative stress status. And the reason why I'm the type of provider I am today is actually because of my network. So I originally started in this network of most of my girlfriends, even to this day, are still in the medical aesthetics, whether it's pharma or whether it's in the device industry. So what does that give me? It gives me a bit of an insider edge, especially when they go from company to company, because they learn the ins and outs of this product, they learn the ins and outs of this product, and we've come across a couple of things over the last couple of years. I'm not sure if I'll talk about that stuff publicly. So there's that element. And then with getting into the biohacking community, I'd say in 2017, working alongside some of the biggest heavy hitters, Dave Asprey, JJ Virgin, Ricola, and really looking at how can we shift the way that we care for people? How can we keep people healthy? So combining those two networks is what I've come to understand to shape how I operate today. So my recent paper on oxidative stress status and its impacts on the skin aging is actually written in an effort to support both the practitioner and the patient. It's open source, anyone can read it. So for the practitioners, it's creating awareness around if someone has red puffy eyes, if their nervous system is kind of, you can tell they're dysregulated, they're kind of jittery, a lot of brain fog. Again, eyes are red and puffy, hair loss, there's some autoimmune stuff, hormones, thyroid, excess weight, weight loss, you name it. If there's any type of clear indication of oxidative stress or they're just not feeling well, that's when I recommend actually delaying any rejuvenation. That's going to add to someone's oxidative stress status and their cell danger response, even just doing a laser treatment. So I wrote that paper to create awareness. I also wrote that paper to help the biohackers out there figure out, okay, what can we actually do to biohack for the skin? So then I unpacked the air, water, lighting, electromagnetics, and parasite detoxing. Parasite detoxing was like the icing on the cake for me. The dead eyes thing you mentioned, because you mentioned so many great things when you spoke there. So the dead eye thing is a real thing. And in my clinical practice, I saw this a lot in women in their 20s and 30s. This is the time where women are often doing rejuvenation prior to a wedding, or they're married and they're feeling stressed out. They're a young mom, they're working like a man, and they got to keep up with the Joneses, right? It's like this dead eye situation. But then in my clients, total contrast, clients 60 to 90, they have this vibrancy to them. What is that? Why is someone younger that maybe has more collagen appearing less beautiful than someone that has the sparkle? And that's radiance. And there's a cool thing with that. Radiance, I think, comes from purification, body, mind, spirit, energy. And in Ayurveda, radiance is the 10th body, and it's the quality of the electromagnetic projection of all of your other body systems coming along. So when you meet with someone and they have those dead eyes and then they open their mouth and you're like, wow, not much going on upstairs. Or you meet someone and they're warm, they're engaging. When they're speaking, they're talking about things that you have shared values with, right? Whole different feeling with someone who's radiant or with someone who's just, making the shell look good, keep up with the Joneses on social media and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I've noticed the same thing. Like, I believed 60 or even 40 when I was younger, that you're going to look a certain way, feel a certain way. And the more time that I spent in the hospital, I never worked in aesthetics or anything like that, but I would take care of the sickest of sick, in my opinion, in med surg. And I did not want to feel like that when I got older. It's both, it's working from the inside out and the outside in, because I heard this on a podcast years ago that really health is beauty. Why do we put on makeup? Because we want to have rosy cheeks to show that we have good circulation. So sure, you can do that. Is there something we can do internally to facilitate that? And that's really what you're focusing on when you're helping people. And I absolutely love this, because you're not here to shame anyone that chooses, certain things. But I agree with you. I've gotten away from neuromodulators Botox is what I've always used, and fillers, because I do think it changes the face also over time. If you do too much of it, it shouldn't be to fill in wrinkles per se. It would be more like volume loss in areas where you lost it. But the biggest mistake I made was putting it, I had nasolabial folds and all these commercials for a certain product. So I did it there and it weighed my face down and I almost looked like a baboon in a way. I'm not against those things. I do intermittently use Sculptra in this area, but I think a lot of people are moving away from those things. So if so, why do you think that is?
Well, I'm going to tell you something that I learned in my experience being in the industry since 2011 is that it really takes a good 7 to 8 years for something to be on the market before we can truly evaluate it. So I saw this with some of these other biostimulator injectables where, oh my goodness, a couple of years ago, I had a client of mine and she had this certain injectable done and there was a huge class action lawsuit, but she like just missed the cutoff for that and, huge inflammation from it. So I think what was going around at that time, she got exposed to something and then her cell danger response, oxidative stress status, her toxic bucket got really full and then had the inflammation from that. Getting back to, you looking after the sickest of the sickest, what brought me into becoming a registered nurse was my mom's an RN. And I was there holding the hands of both of my grandparents as they passed away, crossed over. And so I really loved palliative care, being able to care for the sick and dying in just a really beautiful way, reading the room, being there with the dynamics of the family. And then actually, after I graduated, it was really hard to find work, believe it or not. So I wanted to do palliative care, but there was another plan for me. I did peds ICU for a bit. The reason I'm mentioning that, learning about kids and their development and things that can be done while we're in the preconception phase, while we're pregnant, that's actually one of the main drivers why before the car crashes, I was doing biohacking, was to get my body in the healthiest state possible to make another human. Right. So long preconception phase. I think I've been in it for about 5 years, just not ready to have the family quite yet. But that's also something to consider if you are considering kids, looking at all these things. The choices you're making for rejuvenation is really key. Some of the choices that you made, Ashley, for rejuvenation and what you noticed with the puffiness, felt like you looked like a baboon, was actually, I think, probably related to blockage of lymph in your face. So I'm a huge fan of moving lymph, doing myofascial release on the entire upper body, torso, good posture. Also getting good blood flow by reducing exposure to electromagnetic frequencies and wireless cellular radiation. I think there's actually research on that. Skin irritation, dry skin, and dry eyes have, there's studies to speak to how electromagnetics and blue light are impacting that as well. So yeah, warm looking rosy cheeks, sign of good circulation, 100%. The other thing, so you mentioned nasolabial folds are really popular on social media a couple of years ago. So were tear troughs, tear trough fillers. You'd see these incredibly compelling before and after photos of someone who had really bad lower eye bags. And then poof, immediately after, a cc of filler per side, their tear troughs are gone. But what you didn't see was afterwards. So given my experience in oculoplastics for over 11 years, guess what clinic they'd come to if they had an issue? They'd come to the specialist office. So I got so tired of seeing side effects from this very popular treatment on social media. So I wrote my first paper on eye aging. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because you basically had lymph blockage in your face, very likely. Obviously, this isn't medical advice, it's educational information only. If you think you have a medical condition, you must seek the guidance of a licensed physician. That's probably what you were experiencing. And so we see that a lot with the lower eyelid area too. Just wanted to put that out there. Is that sure with neuromodulators, are you going to get muscle atrophy? Well, in my jawline paper, I talk about how we can see a reduction of the jowls, published in my paper. And also in my paper, we see how fillers can block lymph flow, not everything is without concern. And it does take that 7 to 8 years of something, including lasers, including really trendy energy-based technologies, to be on the market for about 7 to 8 years, so that we can sort out the energy, we can sort out the recovery. The device might actually need an overhaul. 7 to 8 years has always been my rule of thumb for anything new from an injectable or a laser perspective.
So have you tried Sculptra?
Statistically speaking, biostimulators have the lowest incidences of adverse events compared to hyaluronic acid fillers, right?
So interesting. We're always told, oh, it's what you have, so there's no issue. But
yeah, what some of these do is they basically lay down a scaffolding for your body to make more collagen, elastin, or fat to kind of grab onto. So for me, no, I have not had any biostimulators myself.
Okay. I am choosing to use Sculptra. I really like that, but that is a concern that I have more recently. Am I blocking the flow in my face? And when you get conventional filler or hyaluronic acid filler, you can't move your face. You can't lay on a massage table for a few days, and movement and getting the stagnation out has been really helpful for me. We want good blood flow. The lymph is something we don't really talk about, at least in nursing, unless someone has lymphedema or it's a really serious issue. So I think that's really, really important. And you mentioned something to me about fillers and HRV. So what did you notice when you had that connection there?
Oh, I love getting asked this question because I was nothing short of surprised when I, a number of years ago, had some filler done, hyaluronic acid. It's a European filler. So in the United States, you can't get this one. Anyways, not going to say the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, I had some done, and my HRV tanked. And here I am, used to 100% sleep score on Oura Ring, 8 Sleep, especially with wearing EMF protective clothing while I sleep, sleeping in silver threaded blankets, purifying the air, watching the blue light before bed, eating the right foods, all these things. But it's the EMF clothing that actually got me the best sleep score, believe it or not. First night I did that. So I was doing everything else the same, but having rejuvenation at some degree, what that did, I think, this is just my personal experience, I think it elicited what's called the cell danger response. That's what happens when the body's undergoing oxidative stress, right? It's like this toxic bucket. Something goes in that toxic bucket, it's going to get a little full. So the healthier you are, the more resilient you're going to be if something happens. If you get exposed to, mold somewhere, or you get exposed to canola oil or dairy or gluten or all these things that are in the world, it's really hard to avoid all these things. So when we keep the oxidative stress as low as possible, sure, some of us can handle that. But what was interesting for me was the HRV tanked. So that told me that rejuvenation has the potential to add to someone's level of oxidative stress or their toxic bucket, which then led me to consider, okay, if someone has overt signs of oxidative stress, maybe they shouldn't have rejuvenation at that point. Mm-hmm. But a lot of practitioners, they're not going to really put that 2 and 2 together until, number one, they know about it, or number two, they're interested in this stuff, or number three, have experienced it for themselves. What I love to hear is when people who are considering rejuvenation, and I always ask people's preferences, and I'm seeing more and more people wanting to move towards having healthy skin as opposed to just straight to injectables. The body always knows. So when someone says, no, I don't want to do this, I just want to do this, it's just, you have to just listen to what your body wants, because it's going to tell you. You should never be talked into something that you don't want to do, especially if every pore in your body, every fiber is like, no, I don't have a great feeling about that. You got to listen to that stuff, because nobody's going to look after you except you.
Yes. Well, that will definitely hit home with my audience, and in many areas. I mean, that's true across the board. Why are we making these decisions? And even just basic question about aesthetics. Maybe the reason I got into it, or that moment that you shared where you were, spoken poorly about how you looked, if we're doing it to try to gain the approval of someone else, I think that is such a trap. You're always going to find something else. So I would not make your love for yourself conditional upon how you look. I love myself. And so I want to look and feel as great as I can versus living in fear, because the stress, the anxiety, the things that we really couldn't measure before make a big difference. And that's why I'm so grateful, for this new stress feature, even from Oura. I'm being able to see that before we're like, oh, it's invisible. It doesn't make a big difference. So you kind of answered this. What is the modern consumer who is considering rejuvenation wanting to do more of and less of? So you mentioned healthy skin versus just injectables. Why do you think that shift is happening?
I would say it's not for the most. However, the way that I operate, I attract certain types of people, primarily intuitive empaths. People that want to look at, looking healthy and not overdone. So because of that energy that I was putting out there and living and breathing myself too, I started to attract really savvy customers, clients, consumers, patients, whatever you want to call them. And then I started to see this kind of like niche of people that were looking at all clean, all organic, hippy dippy skincare, right? The oil cleansing trend, all these things. Don't even get me started on some of the things I see with that. But at the end of the day, what I started to notice was people who were wanting to look at, not really trusting what a lot of these big beauty companies were doing. And I've even seen canola oil and some of the biggest clean, natural beauty out there products. If I said the name of it, I probably guess that 80% of your listeners are using it.
Wow.
And they have canola oil. You can actually go on their manufacturer's website, type canola oil, and you'll see 2 products pop up. That's really new. That's as of like 6 months. So all of my recommendations are subject to change based on reformulation. But what I will say is for the ultra savvy client who's looking for the cleanest of the cleanest, they usually go a little too crunchy. Because if you're using something with like a hyaluronic acid or vitamin C or a vitamin A, you need those antioxidants to be stable. Otherwise, you're going to become a free radical. So that's why I've always been a huge fan of practitioner grade products where it's blending, as clean as possible while still delivering what we want it to do. I think it's just really interesting over the last couple of years, your question about what the modern consumer wants, why more and more people are looking to care for their skin and phrasing it like I'm looking to improve my skin health. It makes me really happy. And I think that is simply also related to more and more people looking for alternative methods to care for themselves. I remember in my nursing school, I took an alternative modality course and I loved it. And, there's meditation, there's sound healing. So we've seen nurses in like all sorts of really cool different faculties. But I think we're seeing a bit more of a shift with that. I mean, I think that comes down to also consciousness and the fact that we're living on a planet that's like being hurled through space, going through different energies. I mean, we chatted on DM. It's like, check the Schumann today, right? These things affect us. And I think that some of us are simply becoming more and more aware that the way that we care for our bodies has a direct impact on the quality of our life, our relationships, and our ability to connect and just be well in regards to body, mind, spirit, and energy. At the depths of it, I think it's the hyper novelty, and I think it's some energy shifts.
I remembered what I was going to ask you before, which was about HRV and fillers and things like that. So when I was going to see my provider in 2020 and 2021, she would ask me if I had taken the juice. And every time I went in, I was asked this question. I'm like, the answer is still no, thank you. She wasn't trying to give it to me, but she just wanted to know. And I asked, is there a reason why you keep asking? And there was a new guideline that said, if you have received either of those, or if you've taken the juice, wait 2 weeks before doing that. So like you mentioned before, a lot of providers are just like, you want the service, I'll give it to you, when there could be a lot of other things to look for, and these nuances are overlooked. So what did you hear about the connection between the two of those things?
Well, there's some research that's available now, actually.
Mhm.
And so, like I said before, it takes about 7 to 8 years for us to really see what's going on. And you can actually look this up, PubMed, if either someone had a specific infection or a specific medication. We're actually seeing pharmacodynamics and kinetics, which I actually had a feeling would happen. Like I said, Zoom consults 2017, this 20-something-year-old nurse, people flying across the globe to come and see me. I just have this really good track record of seeing the writings on the wall before they happen and trusting my instincts. To answer your question around all of that, I was in a pretty rough car crash and actually had to take time off work. That I think was sort of divine timing around that. I mean, sure, it was the hardest time of my life. And I talk about, the struggles of this that I went through because doing rejuvenation was a huge part of my identity. But at the same time, I'm kind of that super nerdy researcher. It's like, give me some data. I need to see some data before I can answer any questions. So that's how that worked out for me. Someone out there was looking out for me.
So yeah, you were not administering these because of the aesthetic portion, because of the car accident and how that shifted everything. But you would have felt that there is a conflict there because we just don't know enough at that time.
As providers, we have to talk about evidence.
Mm-hmm.
We have to talk about research. This was a tricky time, and a lot of us really grappled with this.
Yeah.
And I've always had that wait and see approach, especially as a woman of childbearing years. So it's unethical to test things like retinol, hydroquinone, benzoyl peroxide. It's unethical to test these skin actives on pregnant women and their unborn, unconsenting baby. And even if you go on EWG with these, things that haven't been tested because it's unethical to, certain products that are actually great products are going to have a really low rating because of that inability to test and there's not enough data on it. So when it comes to our rejuvenation, when it comes to the way that we choose to live our lives, the information we choose to focus on, getting back to the basics is more important than ever. And also reducing your exposure to stress. I know that's easier said than done. The news is going to be there tomorrow too, by the way. So I am very conscious about what I allow around my field. I'm all about purification. I think that true lasting beauty, radiance really comes from purification. Again, I study radiance now, which is, I hit the jackpot. I get to talk about beauty and radiance. Love it. Must be doing something right in my life. But this is really key. So it's the relationships we have, it's the music we listen to, or choose not to listen to because of how it makes us feel, the movies that we watch, what we choose to focus on, because we live in such a hyper novel time. I think a lot of the things that we see, so for example, beauty marketing, preying on our fear to get you to buy this, ID puffing cream, this ridiculous looking gadget that isn't really going to do anything. It just comes down to being a more conscious consumer in every layer, from the food you eat to what you wash your body with, what you put on your skin, the clothing that you wear. It's up to us. Nobody's going to make those choices for us, nor are they allowed to. But it's about staying strong with that and focusing on the things that matter instead of getting distracted and divided. It's family and faith. I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of the mic drop on that. Family and faith, two most important things, I think, for humans to really focus on every day, and gratitude. And these are key things that I've just noticed in my most beautiful, high vibrant clients, is they have a beautiful family unit. They have some type of faith or spiritual practice. They eat well, they exercise. They use good skincare and maybe do some lasers and stuff like that too. Maybe some eyelid surgery as well if they feel like that's something that's going to help them out. Lots of options these days.
But what I'm hearing from you is that it's okay to do those things, but we're missing the foundation. In my coaching, I work on people dealing with burnout. And
you're also diving so much deeper. So I know that we're short on time. I would love to do a part 2 because there were so many things I could talk to you about. You're really hammering home this low oxidative stress lifestyle. And you talk a lot on your Instagram about that. So where can people find you on Instagram and all of your channels? Because I think you're such a wealth of knowledge. You're walking the walk, and I would love to learn from you too. So where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, the School of Radiance podcast, place to be, lots of fun episodes. It's kind of like these positive little nuggets of radiance throughout your day to help you be a more conscious consumer. At the end of the day, I'm all about that. And yeah, book one-on-one with me over at the schoolofradiance.com. I have tutorials there, 7 weeks from basics to advanced, huge emphasis on lymphatic drainage. By the way, none of these like, gimmicky facial yoga videos. This is what's going to do the job, right? Save you time and money on that stuff too. And then my membership. So the School of Radiance membership is where I deep dive on some of the behind the scenes practices that I do. Okay. And that I see my most successful clients doing in regards to communication, relationships, etiquette, the mindset of beauty and radiance, and of course, the detoxing. Yeah. And really what I do behind the scenes in regards to frequency and clearing out things that no longer serve me, especially, pesky parasites that I'm not going to talk about publicly. So those are the 3 ways to connect: one-on-one, tutorials, membership, and free stuff. The School of Radiance podcast. And then I have a free 30-minute biohacking training. It's totally free. It's all at schoolofradiance.com. You're going to love it. And I break down these 5 oxidative stress status reducing steps for you.
Amazing. Well, I didn't get to meet you in person, but I saw you at the biohacking conference.
I saw you too. You're beautiful.
You had this white outfit. I was tapped out. I'm definitely an introvert, but I'm just like, look at this beautiful, radiant woman. So I'm so grateful that I got to get to know you more. I really would love to dive into more topics like EMF and Viome and the feminine masculine balance, just so many things. I can't wait to do a consult. I'll be sharing my experience with the audience. And if you send me those links, I'll make sure to include them. So check out Rachel. She is such a wealth of knowledge, and I really enjoyed having you here today. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's been great. I saw you at the conference too. And it just, we're meant to connect when the timing is right.
Yeah.
But I have been following you for a long time. Love what you're doing. You're doing it in like just this fun, but still no nonsense way. And I respect that. Yeah. And look forward to part 2 and you being on my show too and doing your consultation. And for all of you tuning in, use promo code Ashley Taylor for 15% off of your one-on-one and joining my next skincare tutorials as well. So thanks, everybody.
You are the best of the best as far as this type of offer. I've never heard anything like this, maybe from some other people, but you are the person I'd want to learn from for many reasons. So thank you again. I can't wait to dive in, and I will share with my audience what I think. So thank you, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to the High Maintenance Hippie podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, rate it, and leave a review, ideally a 5-star review if you loved it. All of this is free of charge and really helps me to be able to run the podcast. If you take a screenshot and tag me, I'll repost you and shout you out on Instagram. So tag Ashley Taylor Wellness and High Maintenance Hippie Podcast. If you have any feedback or guests that you'd like to have, I would love to hear from you so that I'm not just talking at you. I really want to deliver things that are valuable. So send me an email with any feedback, suggestions, or ideas for guests at ashley@ashleytaylorwellness.com. And I will leave you with a disclaimer. Please know that this is not medical advice or replacement for seeking medical care. Everything discussed on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Always consult with your medical provider before making any changes. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.